Good morning. Thank you for coming out here in this little bit of cold weather here. My name is Rick. I come out here to the Wildcat and volunteer sometimes whenever I get the chance. And I've been gardening for quite a long time. Mostly doing the regular landscaping, putting in plants and then taking them out a couple of months later and putting in something else again. So typical landscaping stuff never caught my attention. It was boring. Anything that I thought was interesting, they would be like, nope, that's a weed, pull it out. So, eventually I started gardening for myself, and I went through the whole, the whole regime of going to Home Depot, getting the potting soil, getting the plants from them, and then trying to do everything with the amendments, not the organic amendments, but the chemical fertilizers such as the Miracle-Gro and all that stuff. Struggled. Couldn't keep pests off of my plants. Couldn't get my plants to grow right. It was just a nightmare, and it seemed like the soil would just kind of evaporate, and I would have to keep buying more, putting more, going out there, and it was not enjoyable at all whatsoever. So then I started looking to nature, and I look out there at the parks, look out there like right here, and like, who is fertilizing these trees, these plants, who's taking care of them? And the answer is themselves. It's a whole ecosystem. So I went down the rabbit hole with soil microbiology, and that led me to the Soil Food Web by Elaine Ingham. It's peer-reviewed science. There's a lot of literature out there about it. I suggest you guys look it up on YouTube, listen to some of Elaine's lectures. You can ask my wife. I subjected them to hours upon hours of lectures about vermicomposting, the Soil Food Web, Texas native plants. So I'm here to show y'all what I've learned, what I've went through like a trial and error and worked for it. So I'm going to share with y'all so y'all don't have to go through this. And this is something that I use to take my front yard, my wildlife habitat, and turned it into a closed loop system. I do not water, I do not fertilize. The only amendments that I really add are compost, which you'll see over here, and that's really for the little bit of lawn that I got left. And then that's it, maybe biochar sometimes. But that was initially at the beginning about 3 years ago, and then that was it. The only things that get water in my yard are little plants, because I do like to experiment and see how far I can take these plants, how much these native plants can withstand. And I plant by seed in the middle of August, and I plant by little plants in the middle of August, but they get as minimal water as I can. And surprisingly, with good setup, seeds will outdo the little plants in the middle of the summer, which was a very big surprise for me. Right now I have blanket flowers on the side of my house, just in full bloom like it's summer, so it's kind of cool, and all the neighbors, they get mad at me because my place looks kind of wild, which it is, it's for the wildlife habitat. But they get jealous of the butterflies and the hummingbirds and all the other wildlife that comes through. They get jealous of all the color that I have throughout the whole year, and they get jealous that I don't have to water my lawn at all. That being said, I did make a little presentation, but I don't think y'all are going to be able to see it, so I'll just kind of read it out to y'all. And so we'll get started here. So first of all, what is vermicomposting? So vermicomposting is, typically you'll find it done with the red wiggler, the tiger worm, or the manure worm as it's called. The specialized digestive system of this worm can put out a really rich, nutrient-rich and microbially packed amendment that you can use for your garden. You can use for your compost piles, and you can use for mulch piles. You can use for inoculating your whole yard, really. And you can use that with like worm teas or worm casting teas as well, and you can make a little bit go a long way. One of the problems that I found with a lot of information online is that everybody wants you to set up a bin, and the way that they have you set it up, eventually you get overloaded with worms. You only have so much room, and my garden is very little, so I don't have very much room to keep them at all. So I learned from Heather Rinaldi over at Texas Worm Ranch. Keep her name in mind. She's a great resource. So I learned this method on how to do it. I spent a few days with her helping her move to New Mexico. And then I got in trouble at home because I managed to convince my wife to let me keep some worms in the house. Heather said, well, you can take as many as you want. So I loaded up her car full twice and brought them home. And when I tell people I have a ton of worms, I'm not lying. I have a literal ton of worms. But that was about 5 years ago, and I still have some of the big bins. I've used them up, used them in my yard, gave them to people, gave worms away, and just tried as much as I could to get rid of them, but they're still there. And I don't need as many anymore, you know, so I kind of went overboard. And so I'll teach you that today. So vermicomposting is a cold compost, meaning it's not like the regular hot composting process there, which relies on microbial, mainly bacterial life to produce heat, to break everything down, kill weed seeds, and kill any pathogens that you might have in here. So with worm composting, you do have to be a little bit more careful. Hot composting can be a fast process if it's done right and done correctly, but a lot of the times, most people are not going to really get it correctly. There is going to be something that's going to go wrong, because it can be very finicky with the carbon to nitrogen ratios, and then the water and moisture levels in there, and then turning it when you need to turn it, and making sure you get enough oxygen in there to keep everything aerated. Because the key word in everything compost is aerated. If it has been deprived of oxygen, it is anaerobic, and it is bad news. You could have plant pathogens, you could have people pathogens in there that are no good. You do not want those out in your yard. So hot composting, 6 to 8 weeks. Vermicomposting, generally in the literature, you'll see that it takes 6 months to get good, decent castings. I'm going to teach you how to do it in a month. You know, so yeah, and I mean, this is very simple. This is something that you can do at home. I got in trouble. I wasn't supposed to bring any more worms home, but I still wanted to experiment. So I ended up making my own little container, kind of like that, and just to see how far I could push it, I put it next to where my mother-in-law sits in the living room. And so they stayed there for a couple of months, and she didn't know until I accidentally let it slip, and then, you know, all hell kind of broke loose. So we rely on microorganisms and macroorganisms to produce the compost. That being said, ideally, you know, most people, they just want the worms in there. Well, in nature, you just don't have worms that are breaking everything down. You have other microorganisms, and you have other macroorganisms, you know, springtails, roly-polies, earwigs. I do not mind those at all, because they just add to the diversity of the microbial life in the soil. And their shells, when they die, and their frass has beneficial properties for plants as well. So because it is a cold composting process, it does not destroy weed seeds, and it does not destroy pathogens, so you do, again, have to be careful of that. It does provide more nitrogen in the compost than the hot composting, mainly because the hot composting, a lot of that nitrogen will off gas during the decomposition process. And this can be done very cheaply with very minimal space. And I mean, you can do like a little Tupperware to however big you want to get. You know, you can do windrows if you wanted to and keep them outside, although that's a different strategy there altogether. We can use this to make aerobic compost teas. Again, the key word is aerobic. And those can be applied to large areas with relatively little inputs. Worm castings and vermicompost teas, they improve soil structure, they improve the strength, they improve water retention, and they just make your soil overall better. If you put the carbon material down in your dirt is inert, soil is alive. If you put that carbon material down and you inoculate with worm castings or worm teas, you will turn that dirt into good living soil. I have done this in my yard over by DFW Airport. We are not lucky like y'all are here. We all have that nice sandy soil you can dig, you know, real easily. We have the hard, real compacted clay. And within the span of 4 or 5 years, I've gotten to the point where I needed a pickaxe to dig, to the point where I just use my hands to make holes and put plants in the ground. I find worms everywhere. I find all kinds of life everywhere. I've had owls, I've had hawks, box turtles just come through the yard. We've had lots of good things since we dumped the True Green guy and just went all organic. Vermicompost used in the garden will attract beneficial earthworms that are in the garden already. So a lot of people want to take their worms, their composting worms, and throw them out in their garden. That's great and dandy maybe for like a few hours, especially here in Texas, but they will promptly die because our Texas soils, they do not have the topsoil that worms need. And then also, you know, the temperature swings are just wild and they will not survive that. And then we get really dry as well. So a few things to know before you start with this. As I mentioned, the soil food web. As above, so below. I find that saying to be very true. You know, there's worlds above us and there's worlds beneath us as well. Everything that you see going on up above is also going down underneath. So the concept of the soil food web is, anybody here that's seen The Lion King, The Circle of Life? Yeah, it's that underground, basically. You know, so there's all these complex relationships that take place that have evolved over billions of years, and plants have actually evolved around that. So the main thing that people miss is the microorganisms in the soil. They're actually the plant's digestive systems. They cycle the nutrients into forms that plants can uptake them, and different microbes produce different nutrients as well. You know, so plants have evolved. They with all these microscopic organisms, and so it starts with the sun. Plants grow, they photosynthesize the sun, they turn the sun's energy into carbon, put it down on the ground. They put down root exudates, which are just protein, sugars, and carbohydrates, which in Elaine Engen's terms, which I like as well, they're putting out cakes and cookies to attract fungi, protozoa, you know, the main base of that food web. And then from there, you know, the predatory nematodes, beetles, earthworms as well come in, and then they start eating the little guys, and the web goes on. It's a very complex web. More so than a food chain, where a food chain just describes like the energy path linearly. A food web kind of encompasses everything, and that's just, in the literature it says everything, but really like nobody knows anything, like everything, you know. So still to this day we're finding new microbial life underneath our feet, you know. So take that with a grain of salt. Let's see what else we got here. So microbes, microbial life, like worms, and us, they're people. I consider them people. They have the very same needs that we do. They need a home, they need food, they need a shelter, and they need water, and they need lovins. You know, we all need that. So keep that in mind before you continue, you know, because everything that you do in the garden can have an impact. Even something as little as using your city water to water your yard. Because the city water has lots of chloramine and chlorine in it, it will kill off any good beneficial microbes that you have there, except for maybe the bacteria. The bacteria are very resilient. They can survive a lot of things, and that's how these big companies get you into that cycle of needing them for weed and feed. You put out the weed and feed, you put out the pesticide, herbicide, fungicide, and it kills everything off in the soil. Now you're dependent on the chemicals that they put to give that plant a quick hit. Those chemicals that they use, most of the time they're salts, so they're ruining your soil as you're going. And each time, each year, you need more and more and more, or you need to amend your soil in order to neutralize that, which takes a long time. So about the red wigglers, it's an epigeic earthworm, meaning it feeds and inhabits the top layer of the forage soil. So where you see the leaves and then the top soil, usually that's, you know, anywhere from 6 to 3 inches at most. So they don't travel very much. They don't burrow in the ground like the night crawlers do, but they are very versatile when it comes to composting, because they just live on the very top layer. They're reddish brown with small rings around the body. They have a fat yellow tail when they're mature. They can live in a broad range of temperatures. I put 45 to 90 degrees. They can actually live above and under that, but I mean, why would you want to do that to them? Would you want to be in that? I don't. Like, it's cold to me right now. So they wouldn't like that. They tend to thrive around 60 degrees to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, you know, between the 70 and 80. It's a really good sweet spot. If it gets a little higher, because of, you know, like the food that you have in there and the microbial life in your bin, it'll be okay. It's not gonna go, you know, way up high. So all earthworms, they breathe through their skin, so they have to maintain moisture in their skin just like we do in our lungs. They have no teeth and they have no eyes, and so their skin cells are actually sensitive to light, so they'll run away from UV light. And you can use this to your advantage as well when it comes time to harvesting and getting your castings out. So since they have no teeth, they have a crop and a gizzard, just like birds and dinosaurs did. So they have to have grit. You know, just like birds, they have to have grit or little stones in order to digest their food. The worms have to have the same because they're basically just a tube. You know, it's a gut that's a tube, basically. Their gut microbiome is very diverse. Their intestinal tract can have around 1,000 times more microbial life than their surroundings and the food that they eat. And composting worms, they don't eat food scraps. Their main source of food is microbial life, so fungi, protozoa, bacteria, and they also ingest some of that food that you're putting in there to get at these microbes there. So they eat the microbes that are decomposting your food. So that's why when you vermicompost, if you're doing it right, you don't get any of the smells, because they take care of the microbial life that emits those nasty smells. Plus, if you keep it aerated, there's less chance of anything bad going on in there. Whenever you get anything that's anaerobic, you'll get like an ammonia smell, or a smell that smells like fresh cow manure, kind of like leaves do sometimes. That's because, you know, when they get wet and they stack together, it gets anaerobic, and then that bacteria starts coming through and you get that smell. So worm castings are loaded with this microbial life, which is really what we're after here. So they can double their population in about 60 days. Honestly, it depends on how you tailor your bin, because you can have a bin set up to where your focus is mainly on growing your herd, or your focus is mainly on having good quality worm castings. Good quality worm castings are worm castings that are rich and more fungal dominant. They have a higher fungal to bacterial ratio than normal soils or compost would. There's never really an instance where the fungal matter or organisms will outnumber or outweigh the bacteria, but you need a certain amount. The older an ecosystem is, the more fungal dominant it will be. Our old growth forest up in the northwest, they are very fungal, and they go through a period where literally their whole forest floor is nothing but fungi. Once everything else wakes up, everything depends on that fungi that will wake up, and they will continue to eat it, and it almost completely decimate the thing. But nature's amazing, fungi are amazing, there's spores everywhere, and they come back each year and they keep that cycle going. They reproduce after reaching sexual maturity, so around 30 to 45 days after hatching. It's pretty fast. They're hermaphroditic, so they have two sexes, but they still must mate with another worm in order to reproduce. They lie head to tail next to each other to transfer sperm. A mucus collar is produced by the clitellum, which is that thick band that sticks out once they're grown, and then that eventually forms a cocoon, and they quote unquote lay it. It literally kind of like slips out. Each cocoon hatches 2 to 5 worms in about 3 weeks. They say typically each cocoon can have about 20 worms. So sometimes you'll get cocoons that hatch more. Sometimes you get some that only like one little worm will come out. And they can lay up to 4, which are lemon-shaped cocoons per week. So that's about 100 to 200 per year. Little worms are whitish with a central pink tinge, showing their blood vessels, and have no developed clitellum. So some people flip out when they see the little tiny white worms, and they think, "Oh no, I got some kind of pest in my worm bin." No, those are babies. They're all right.
Go ahead and show us.
So resources to get you started. I'm going to give you all the big cheat code here, so y'all don't have to go through any of this if you don't want to. You can literally just set up a bin and set it and forget it, come back a month later and harvest from it and start over again. Biggest one is Texas Worm Ranch. They used to be in Garland, Texas. They're now in New Mexico. Right now she is shipping worms and worm castings. She is certified with Lane Ingham Soil Food Web to make compost, to make compost teas, and to identify beneficial microbes in your soil or the compost. So every batch that she makes, she puts it through the microscope and makes sure that it's within specs. Her stuff is so good that when she was over here in Texas, she would have pot growers just buying it by the ton, literally. Like she would have to tell them, okay, like I'm only giving you this much because she wants local people to have some as well. But they would pay top dollar to get it shipped out very next day, because worm castings, like I said, it's the life that you want in it. You know, it's so if you're trying to get them over at Lowe's, Home Depot, or wherever else, if it's been sitting there a while, it's probably dead. If it comes in a plastic bag that's all sealed up, it's bad. Do not get it. But Texas Worm Wrench, txwormwrench.com. Get her stuff. I think she's selling 10 pounds of worms for like $50. I think 2 pounds for like $20, which, I mean, 2 pounds, that's enough. Yeah, that includes shipping. A lot of worms. Yeah, it was just a lot of worms, you know. And I've started worm bins off before with just the $5 container with like 30-40 worms from PetSmart, you know, and I've gotten to grow that way. Like I said, it kind of depends on how you tailor your worm bin. KissOrganics.com if you need anything organic for your garden, any amendments for worm teas, amendments for your garden. Even I don't use them for like pest problems, because I believe in just, you know, letting nature take care of its own, and things will balance out. But they're a really great source for good quality organic materials as well. Boogiebrew.net, they have water filters, compost tea supplies, gardening education, and genuine laughs. They're great guys. I use these every year, the Boogie Blue Plus. It takes out a lot of the chloramine in the city water. I use it for my vegetables. It does make a difference. It makes a huge difference, because if you can't get rainwater, the city water will let your plants get by and it will keep them alive. But when you get rainwater, or you take out that chloramine and you keep your microbes alive, it just lets plants grow, and like they really take care of themselves. And then for your bins, I recommend Ace Hardware or Restaurant Supply place. Your bins should be food grade, food safe. I think the numbers are 1, 2, 3, and 5, I believe. I'm not sure about number 4 on the bottom. You know, I don't think 4 is. I think it's 1, 3, and 5 that are the safest to reuse if you're going to reuse a container. I got these from Dollar Tree because I forgot to get the ones that I bought over there. So these are $1.50, so $3. And I mean, seriously, like this will do 2 homes. If I make them and harvest them at the same time, it'll do 2 homes. What I would do is I would stagger when I build these. So I would put one together, and then 2 weeks later I'll put the other one together, and then, you know, every 2 weeks I could harvest and then use the castings around my home, use it for worm teas. With worm teas, I find that frequent, weaker applications work better than really strong applications all at once, less infrequently. It's also more cost effective, and it helps you manage your worms a little bit more, especially, you know, during the summertime. During the winter time right now, you can set them up and just keep an eye on them, you know, check on them every once, you know, 3-4 days, depending on how big your bin is. And then you can even feed and tailor your bin to either grow your herd, or if you just want to focus on getting that fungal dominant castings, you can do that as well. No Amazon, no Target, no Home Depot. If you go get your bins, they just suck, period. I bought some things from Home Depot, and it said it was aluminum, but guess what? It rusted on me. Aluminum does not rust. So I say go to Ace Hardware. There's usually like an older guy that keeps his area like pristine or legit. Like literally, I went in there for a bolt and I showed him the bolt. He's like, "Oh, it's this pitch, it's this thread, it's, you know, the head size is this big, and oh, you got this from our wheelbarrow." I'm like, "Oh." He took me right where I needed to go. You're not gonna get that at Home Depot. Okay, so getting up for success. These are things that you need to keep in mind for a successful worm bin. So it doesn't smell, so you don't get overrun by pests, so your wife and your mother-in-law don't get mad at you. So first off, more surface area is better than depth. So I see a lot of people, like, they start off with the 5-gallon buckets, which is nice and dandy, you know, but to be more effective, like, you don't need to go that deep. You can use the buckets almost like a flow-through, where if you drill holes underneath them and stack them on top, you can just kind of keep stacking them on top and harvest the ones on the bottom. reset them, and then put them on the top, cover them, and that way the worms just go through the holes, and then you don't have to sift as much. You still have worms, and you still have cocoons in there as well, so it might be a good idea to harvest them if you care that much about your worms. So food safe bins and containers, I mean, you can use whatever as long as you got more surface area than depth. Bus totes are great. Storage totes with lids, Tupperware, aluminum tins, etc. So you want anywhere from a 6 to 12 inch height for the bin. Pick bins that are manageable for you, because another one of those things that I see with a lot of these worm bins that they sell is like, they're pretty big. They're like 4 square feet. You know, once they get filled with castings, them suckers are heavy. You know, even the bus totes that I have at home, once the castings are ready, you know, because I pack them in there, that sucker is heavy. You know, so fill them up as much as you can manage. Get bins that you can manage. For me, I think it's easier to get smaller ones. You can stack them on top of each other. They do not mind the weight. Matter of fact, I think they kind of like a little bit of weight on them. But yeah, just more surface area is the more important thing. Protect from the light and heavy nearby traffic, meaning, you know, if you put them somewhere where the doors are getting slammed open and closed, you know, the doors, you know, letting in cold air, hot air, you know, they're not going to be stable. They're probably not going to be as happy. The vibrations might make them a little bit upset. With the red wigglers, it's not as much as a problem as it is with the other composting worms, such as the blue Java, the European night crawlers, and the African night crawlers. I had African night crawlers at one point, and you would find them everywhere. Like, they were little Houdinis. I mean, I put a lid on this container with no holes just to see. You know, they were still getting through it somehow. Make sure you have plenty of ventilation to create an aerobic environment. Indoor bins work best for convenience, temperature, and safekeeping, because if you keep them outside, chances are something is going to get them, whether it's ants, hammerhead worms, raccoons, possums, chickens, you know, everything finds, yeah, even squirrels, like everything finds worms tasty. So keeping them indoors is really not that hard, you know, and they can take up very minimal space. So liquid at the bottom is not good. So let's get this cleared up. I know there's a lot of bins out there. They have a little nozzle at the bottom, and they market them as you can use the leachate. Do not use that. It's anaerobic. So there could be plant pathogens, there could be people pathogens, there could be worm pathogens in there. Don't use that. If you got signs of that happening, you need to aerate your mix a little more. Add dry leaves on the top, or shredded cardboard. Even newspapers will work, except if you shred newspapers, make sure you do strips and not actual shreds, because the shreds will stick together and become anaerobic. The strips, they kind of fold on each other, and they let air go through them. So think of your bin as a forest ecosystem in a box, and mimic that soil, you know, that forest soil layers. So 3 to 6 inches on the forest floor, which is your compost base on the bottom, and then 3 to 8 inches of leaf layer, which is your bedding, which again, leaves, shredded cardboard, you know, on the top. And then with cardboard, nothing that's shiny, it's just plain cardboard, you know, that would be about as good as you get there. Don't mix your layers like in hot composting, because that can lead to a little bit more heat, a little bit more decomposition, and a little bit of off-gassing as well. So you would mitigate those problems, you know, as far as like the smells in there. So don't overfeed. Again, this will lead to excessive moisture, which can lead to anaerobic conditions, and heat as well. And then pests such as fungus flies, fruit flies, flies in general. So if you don't overfeed, chances are that you're not going to have them. General rule is feed if you're feeding regularly, like about every 3 to 4 days, just make sure the food is gone. The typical life cycle of a fungus or fruit fly is, you know, they hatch within 3 to 4 days. So if the worms have eaten up all the food, and you have fungus gnats in there, the fungus gnats won't have anything to eat, and they'll die, and then they'll get consumed by the microbes, get eaten by the worms. So 3 things to keep in mind. Use finished compost and organic amendments for a base. There's a look, feel, and smell taste to it. So the way it should look like dark brown, like a dark chocolate, like a 70% dark chocolate. So it's gonna be rich in humus, which is what you want. You know, that it's like the great stuff. You can't get enough of that. So the base should feel like a chocolate muffin or a brownie. You know, when you squeeze it, it should hold its shape. It should not drip out any water. No excessive water running. And when you open your hands up, it'll hold its shape, but when you push on it, it'll crumble. You know, like a muffin or a brownie like that. That is the consistency that you want in your base, and that's the consistency that you want in your worm castings as well. That'll keep them from going anaerobic. And then it should smell like the forest floor. Okay, so there should be no smell of like decay, no ammonia smell, no cow manure smell. The forest floor smell, it's actually a good bacteria that releases that smell that we associate with the forest floor. It smells really good. So use rainwater or use humic acid to treat your water, your city water. When you use humic acid, just a little bit will do. Again, you just want to tinge that water lightly with that humic acid because a lot of them are concentrated. So if you get a powder, you know, like a 1/16 of a teaspoon might be too much for a 5-gallon bucket. If you get a liquid version of it, 1 drop might do you for a 5-gallon bucket. You know, just enough to tinge the water, a little bit brown, stir it up, give it like 5 minutes. That acid will neutralize the chlorine and chloramine in there as well. And then it's also a good amendment for your soil as well. Since here we have alkaline soils, it stables out the pH a little bit, and for your vegetable plants, it works really well. So keep less than 1 pound per square foot in your bin. If you have a bin that's 1 square foot, I would start off with 1/4 of a pound or 1/2 pound.
Of worms you're talking about?
Yeah, if you buy them. But like I said, you know, you can start off with a little Tupperware container, put your worms in there and let them reproduce, and then moving up to something bigger. And then, you know, in 2-3 months, you'll have good castings, you'll have a good herd going. And the castings you'll be able to harvest, use, and your worms you'll be able to put them in different bins and separate them out and make more bins if you want to. Otherwise, the worms will self-regulate once they get to a certain point. And that's that point, about 1 pound per square foot. Let's see. So how do we get started? So first, gather your supplies, which I have brought here. So you'll need a container or bins, finished compost, which you can use your compost that you have at home, or you can go buy something that's organic. This stuff right here is what I have at home. I cannot make enough compost at home. It just goes fast. So for clients of mine, I get them from Texas Pure Products and Alan and Melissa. Their stuff is supposed to be OMRI organic listed, and it's really good quality stuff. However, the quality has gone down recently. I will tell you all this because I do believe in transparency and being upfront. So you will have to probably sift through some of it, because you will find some little pieces of plastic in there sometimes, which they're next to a landfill, so I guess, you know, the wind carries stuff over. So I guess it can't be helped. But Texas Pure Products, they got a good base there, and it's woody compost, so it's compost made from mulch, and it's whole cambium layer mulch as well. So that it's not just bark mulch. It's got leaves, it's got the cambium layer, it's got, you know, all parts of the tree in there. Hell, even roots in there sometimes. So it's good quality stuff. I trust them with it. I've used them plenty of times. So you'll need composted or aged mulch, which I have under here. A pillowcase, towel, and some bungee cords to cover them up. Your amendments, which are all organic, you know, I stick with humates, azomite, and you can use something like this that's organic, only listed, and I mainly use just a little bit for all the different inoculations that it has on there. So it has a few different mycorrhizal fungal inoculations in here, as well as different bacterial inoculations, and then it also has some good things that act as microbial foods, such as bone meal, feather meal, blood meal, you know, things like that. We're just using trace amounts, nothing to go crazy, and then it just really supercharges our castings that much more, right? Because we're putting a lot of good things that the microbes need. They'll break those down, you know, and then we'll put them out there for our plants. So you'll need rainwater, a bucket, breaker stones, spray bottle, food scraps, which I forgot, and grit, which grit can be just your garden soil. It can be crushed eggshells as well. That's what a lot of people use. I use sometimes Texas green sand if I can find it, just because again, it's another amendment, and I'm not using much. I use charcoal, as in biochar, because once again, I'm putting that in there. It's just a home for the microbes. It's going to absorb some of those nutrients. My castings are just going to be that much better, and my castings are going to have that much more room for microbial life, because when it comes to microbial life, surface area matters. That's why your food scraps, they go faster if you shred them or if you blend them or process them as well. So next thing is the preparation. So soak the dried leaves in rainwater for about 12 to 24 hours. I have done that already. They're at the bottom of my little yellow container here. Place a breaker stones over them so they're completely submerged. That'll make sure that if you have any microorganisms that you don't want in there, they'll either float to the top and you can get them out and whatever, or unfortunately some of them will die. But some of them, like centipedes and other kinds of beetles, you do not want them in your bin because they will eat your worms. Another thing that I do have a problem with are hammerhead flatworms. They don't come around my yard as much anymore. I think things have stabled out, but my neighbor next door, man, she's like overrun with them. But again, she does the whole weed and feed and all that stuff, so conditions are just right for them, and then my side is pretty mulch and compost rich, so I have lots of earthworms, so I guess earthworms go over on the other side. I don't find them over on my side as much anymore as I used to a few years ago, so I haven't had to go out and hunt and collect and put them in vinegar. Treat city water with humic acid if rainwater is not available. Thaw your food scraps if they're frozen, and then you blend your matured castings with rainwater for inoculation. So I could take some of these worm castings that we have in here, and I could just take a little bit of the castings and mix that up with the rainwater, and that'll make a good inoculation there for mixing with my compost, which is a little bit dry, and I'm gonna get it to that brownie consistency. So, and then you mix the compost with some of the composted mulch and some of the moist leaves, and then you mix in some of your microbial food and amendments, and then you add rainwater slowly so that you don't get it too saturated with water. Again, you want that chocolate muffin consistency and moisture. Place the food scraps at the bottom of the bin. That's going to help keep smells down. That's going to help with, in case fungus gnats or fruit flies get in that bin, it'll help with keeping them from getting into the food that they want and reproducing in there as well. Okay, so then you cover that with 3 to 6 inches of the compost and mulch base, and then you layer 3 to 4 inches of moist leaves on top of that, and then a layer of dry leaves on top of that as well. Again, the dry leaves make a barrier for any kind of fungus gnats to keep from getting in there. Optional, you can place a plastic bag over your bin as long as you leave some of the sides exposed. They will get enough air, and if you're checking on them, every 34 days, they will get enough air, and so will the castings as well. And that's more like if you're having trouble with keeping moisture in your bin, like if your bin's drying out too fast before you can get to it, then you can put the plastic bag or a piece of cardboard to keep that moisture in there, locked in a little bit longer. And then you cover with a pillowcase, towel, and use a bungee cord to tie that. That I found works really well at keeping the fungus gnats away. I used to do the leaves and all that other stuff, but you will get some in there that manage to make their way in there. With the pillowcase or the covering, there's really nothing they can get in there, and if they are in there, they're not going to get out. So you can more or less starve them out at that point. So you store your bin in a temperature stable indoor area. So in the winter time, you put them up on a shelf because heat rises. So, and then the cold will stay down on the bottom, and so temperature's more stable. In the summertime, we put them down low. They can go underneath your kitchen cabinets, or just, I put them where they're easy to get to, and so I can see them, I can look at them, I can check on them, I can, scare the crap out of them every once in a while. But yeah, I just put them where I can get to them and feed them, and they're not in the way. So other considerations, friendly composting bugs, you know, like the doodle bugs of the roly-polies, wood lice, springtails, and earwigs, they're okay. They're just going to add castings. They're going to live and die in there, and their shells actually provide chitin to your castings, and chitin is very important for plant health, and especially seedling health. When you have chitin in your soil, it makes the plants send out a like an alarm. It lets them know there are predatory bugs here. So right off the bat, the seedlings, they have this signal, and so right off the bat they up their defenses. You know, and the same thing with, you know, grown plants. They will be better off as well. Humates and alfalfa meal can help stabilize pH levels in your bin. So if you're getting a little bit of a foul smell, you know, or if it gets a little moist, you can add a little bit of humic acid in there if you're getting a little bit of a foul smell, or humates. Humates will work better. And then, like I said, you can do the alfalfa meal to absorb some of that moisture, dry leaves for the moisture, and the alfalfa meal will help stabilize the pH as well. Don't go too crazy with the alfalfa meal because it is protein rich, and you do not want to overfeed your worms with protein. There is a thing that happens, it's called protein poisoning, and a lot of times most of the time that happens because people were feeding, I think it's called Missouri, or any type of like pre-mixed worm food that's for breeding worms. Like they're real rich, nutritious, but if you overfeed, there's too much protein in there, your worms will literally start falling apart. It's weird to see. I've never had it happen personally, but again, I use diversity, you know, and I've gotten to the point where I don't give my worms just any food scraps. Like I only give them food scraps from stuff that I've grown myself because I know what's in there, you know. And if I don't eat it, my worms aren't eating it. Like I said, I think of them as people now, and it's taken my soil health to just like insane levels. Like we used to get so much flooding, our ground used to crack so much, and now it rains heavily, everybody else is flooded. Our ground is like a sponge, it just absorbs everything, and even like a week afterwards you can still feel it squishy, you know, and I don't have to water, which is always nice. So keep grit, dried leaves, and rainwater in a spray bottle handy to help control the moisture, whether you're going too dry or if you're getting too moist. Consider worms as tiny people. I'll say that again because they really are like tiny people. It's kind of like Horton Hears a Who, you know, between the microbes and the worms, it really is like that. You can harvest castings from each bin about every 4 to 8 months. You can stretch it out a little bit longer if you don't have the time. And then you can do succession bins. So, you know, you start off a bin, 2 to 3 weeks later, you start off another bin, and so that, you know, every half a month or every 3 weeks you can harvest and use in your garden throughout the spring, summer, fall, and even now into the winter you can still use them. Okay, so feeding your worms. Some of these things are very crucial here. So again, variety and moderation, just like us, you know, it's key if you want healthy worms, if you want a bin that's not overrun with pathogens, overrun with pests, or stinky or smelly. So you want to maintain that Goldilocks moisture, again, the brownie consistency. It helps me, I found, to freeze, bake, blend, process your food scraps beforehand. It just breaks things up more for the worms. There's more surface area. Bacteria can colonize faster. Sorry, I just made up a word. So no dairy, big one there. No dairy, no meat, nothing greasy or oily, no onions, no pineapple, and no papaya. Pineapple and papaya will eat up your worms just like they eat up your mouth when you eat them. And then things such as citrus, coffee grounds, broccoli, cabbage, really brassicas, and then teas you want to do in moderation. A lot of those are high in nitrogen, so if you get a lot of nitrogen in there, you could get those smells, so you can get the off-gassing, you can get the excess heat in there, and then, you know, the anaerobic conditions are really the big ones. Once everything starts to get mushy and nothing can get in through there, no air can get through there, then things will go bad, you know. So feed at the bottom of the bin, alternate sides. where you feed them, and that'll make the worms go from one side to the other. So when you get ready, if you don't want to harvest your full bin, you can just put food to attract them on one side, wait a day, and most of them will be on that side, and they can just go through and take from the other side. That way you don't have to do sifting. Sifting can be a bear. Add a little grit if it's not in the bedding already. I add my grit in the bedding beforehand, and then I can add some more afterwards just in case I forget. Make sure the foods you're giving them have not been treated with pesticides, insecticides, or whatever. Again, that's why I stick with what I grow now. Take off all the stickers from your produce peels. Feed a variety of foods for diverse microbes in your castings. Beware of feeding too much protein. Again, and then how we tailor our worm bins to whether we want more worms or whether we want better quality castings that are more fungal dominant will be in what you feed them. So when you feed them more of the greens food, so we'll take it back to composting, you got your greens and you got your browns. Greens are the things that are higher in the nitrogen to carbon ratio, and then browns are a little bit lower. They still have more nitrogen to carbon, but they're lower in the nitrogen. And so depending on what you're feeding them, you can get things going. So the greens, they'll lead to more bacterial conditions. And so bacteria, they reproduce really fast. They tend to take over, and so they make a little bit of heat, and so it makes things for the worms where it's nice and warm. They got plenty of food around, and they just kind of start to go crazy, and they will make more. Now, if you want to focus on your castings and not so much the worms, which I tend to do because I don't want to make more bins, right? I feed more of the brown stuff. So I stick with the leaves, I stick with the mulch, and then I do feed as well because, I have food scraps and I think it's fun, seeing the little ball of worms, when you feed them. And I don't just maintain a bin for just fungal dominant castings or just bacterial dominant castings. I like a bin that has a good variety in there. So I'll keep food, bacterial foods on one side, which if you want to grow your worms really fast, use sweet fruits, watermelon, any kind of melon works great. Bananas are also good as well, and that'll get them really going. And then from there, what I've done before is I started off a little bin with a little $5 container worm bin, starting them off in a little bin, moved up to a slightly bigger bin, and then bigger bin, and so by 3 months, I had a decent sized bin with more than enough for my garden, way more than enough for my garden, and a good decent amount of population of worms in there, and I didn't have to go buy them anywhere and worry if they're going to make it through the shipping or whatnot. And then I also know where what they've been eating. All right, so thanks for listening and sticking through that.
Very interesting.